Welcome back to the Abundant Harvest Homestead. I'm Papa Pepper, and today, dealing with some tomato stuff. This wall behind me is part of what's going to be the best year we've ever had for growing tomatoes. It's been a couple things I've learned over the years, a couple things I apply, some things that I do that I want to share with you guys in hopes that it may bless you as well. You can avoid some of the mistakes that I made. I'll show you a couple clips of just me harvesting a couple of the harvests from here already, and then I'll go into a little more about why I do things the way that I do and why it works better for me. If you look at these tomatoes in front of me, what you can see first of all is that there is a cattle panel. Right now they're up to about $25 for a cattle panel, but you'll also notice from the stem up to about this point, there really isn't even really very many leaves. All you see is piles of tomatoes getting ready, and also tomatoes that are just about ripe. Once you get up here, you can see that it's heading up towards 7-8 feet long, and that's where a lot of the new growth is. That's where a lot of the leaves are. If you watch my channel, you may have heard me say it before, but I believe something like a tomato cage is just incredibly poor technology. It's inferior, and I don't recommend people using them, especially the little ones. A lot of times these days people almost take something bigger like my 4x4 wire and make just a giant hoop cage for it. But to me, I like growing them in a two-dimensional stage, kind of like this, where this is just one flat wall that I can cover in tomatoes. It makes it very easy to pick. I don't really have to reach my hand through anything. The ones on the opposite side have a hole this big to reach through and grab. Nothing too difficult. And yeah, if we look at a couple things here, a lot of these old leaves were dying anyway. So what I would do is cut them off, and then also any suckers that were coming, I would cut off. You gotta watch, because sometimes when these guys get started where they're gonna flower and fruit, they'll look kind of like a sucker. We don't want to cut these off or we won't have a harvest. But here's a good example of where this leaf came off the main stem. We have a sucker growing. This is going to make a whole new branch. I can keep it if I want, or I can cut that off here. I'll just use my nail and pinch it right off. If I drop this in water, it can actually root and give me a whole new plant for free. It's called cloning. It'll be an exact copy of this plant because it is this plant. It's just a different portion. But right above here where there was no leaf, you can see that I've got some young flowers starting. So these flowers are different than this sucker. Should be able to tell the difference there. And then up here again, we have another leaf with a sucker and then another flowering one. Here you can see where the old leaves have not been removed yet. This stuff has got to get cut off. And this is a tomato clip. If I'm able to keep up with it, I can just weave these back and forth through here until they reach the top. I've done that successfully with a number of them, but sometimes it helps to be able to clip to it. So I clip my plant to the structure. Here it's a cattle panel, and that holds it in place. It keeps it from slipping, especially in this case where you see it forks off above there. Whether you grow them on one single stem or allow them to branch out is your choice. You can see on one like this, I let it double here. Right here it splits from 1 into 2, and then here it splits again. And this one over here splits. Depends on how you want to do it. I'll give you a look down this length of tomatoes here, and then I'll show you a different spot and where I'm pruning and putting in some tomato clips. I will say that this year has also been a very bad year for just heat. We went through a really hot part. That was also a pretty dry part. Look at what happened to some of my tomatoes. These here actually got blistered by the sun, and now they're beginning to kind of rot and mold. You see it here. You can see it here. Here's a little bit. It may overcome. It seems to be healing up pretty good. There's one there, and then down here. Now these I'm going to snip off today, and I'm going to put them into my chicken pen. My chickens will gladly eat something like that. They'll get a good meal out of it, and then my plant will no longer have to support putting energy into these ones that are not going to be for human consumption. They're just not going to be for us. At this point, they're subpar. They've been blistered by the sun, and then now after a little bit of cooling off and water, they're actually beginning to mold, beginning to rot. So we're going to get those out of here today as I clean up some of my garden stuff. Up the middle here, you can see where all these have dumped out into the pathway, and this is where these tomato clips are really going to come in handy. I invested a little more energy over here before, but then I ran out of tomato clips. So this side didn't get taken care of as much, and I'm going to do some of that today to make a nice pathway again. Here, if you compare the height of what you see growing here to me, and I'm just under 6 feet tall, you can see that these are already taller than me. It's possible that these can go all the way over there. This is another example of a trellis. The one behind there was cedar and bamboo with some wire, but this is just one hog panel all the way across the archway. You can see that these, if I bend them in, are pretty much covering the whole thing. It's kind of like a drive-through, like a walk-through. And what I can do then is have these tomatoes grow all the way across. I really planted 2 plants on each side of here. And if you think about planting 2 plants on each side, 2 sides, you got 4 plants, right? I could spend $5 a tomato cage and never have them grow this great or have this sturdy of a structure to grow on. Or I could grow them on this, and this would actually last longer too. So you can see where it just grows up, and then a lot of the new growth here. I'm going to prune this stuff back today too, Lord willing, and continue to work these through where they'll just be covered. You can see possibly that there's wires running from the top of this up to the cedar too. So if they make it past there and I need something to put them on, I can put them that way. But it gives a nice presentation. A lot of people never walk through a tunnel of tomatoes in their garden, but we get to here, and you can also see there's some basil growing next to the tomatoes. That's a good companion plant for tomatoes and basil, and then it allows you to make some tasty dishes together with the tomatoes and basil, often found together in the kitchen as well. Here's another example of just this big trellis. I'll give you a look at how big it is compared to me. That's like this. Way taller than me, way wider, going all the way around. This side, I've been investing some time last night. I worked till just after dark pruning and clipping because I had just ordered and received a bag of 200 of these tomato clips. Now I call them tomato clips. It just says like garden plant clips on the bag. But this is the technology. Piece of plastic, folds in half there, makes this ring, and we push that together, it clips. There we go. So, room for the tomato vine coming through, and then extra room for the support structure, and it just clips it and holds it to there. This stuff, if you look, here's what a number of the leaves are doing. When they start doing this and dying, it's a great time to snip them off. They're on their way out anyway. They don't need to be hooked up to the plant any longer. This stuff I like to snip up a little bit so it's easier to compost in smaller pieces. And then sometimes you'll also have a nice leaf, but it was growing somewhere you didn't want it. Oh, this one's actually got a little caterpillar on it. Not sure if you can see right there at the tip of my scissors there's a little caterpillar. But in pruning, I want kind of air to come through. I want it to be able to breathe. I want whatever leaves there are to be able to have the sun. And that's part of the reason that I like pruning. I like these Weiss scissors I picked up at Tractor Supply. I've seen them from anywhere from like up to $13 and $14.99 and as low as $7.99, but they are amazing. I use them for all sorts of stuff, and they're also very easy to sharpen. I cut through some pretty decent sized sticks with this. So today, I'm going to be putting these tomato clips to use and showing you why I don't use the tomato cages. And I like using these with something like a cattle panel. Let's take a good before and after look too, and I'll show you one extra thing. Here's a good example. This one came up about 3.5 feet, and then it came through here, and now it's falling back down here another 4 feet. These tomatoes are going to be setting and growing and getting bigger. Same thing over here. You can see a little tomato setting. That's going to put a lot of strain on that plant. It's got a sucker growing right here. You saw me pinch the one off earlier, but if I can, I like using my scissors instead. But this whole thing where it was bent here is going to get trained back up, so it's coming over. Then also you can see that for support now, a number of these are tipping over into my cherry bush. This one's obviously a big bush. It's growing into a pathway I had, but I'm doing a layering method at the bottom where I slid pots down over these before they grew out for the year, and then I've covered them in a heaping mound of soil, and the goal is that they can grow roots under that soil inside the pots that are buried there, and then I'll be able to snip them off and remove them. It works good with a number of different type of stuff. I hope it does with these. We'll see. And then this is going to get pruned back anyway to create the walkway that's supposed to be here, but these guys also have to get up on this wall rather than falling across into here and growing out. You should be able to tell by looking at this where I was working last night. We've got a number of tomato clips in use coming across here. Let's see the lemon boy ripening there. Those ripened yellow. Sometimes, you know, you can use this one here is just held back and in place by this one being clipped over the top of it. They just cross here, and that one's clipped up there. And then you can see here's where I ran out of daylight, where it gets all big and leafy again. So I'm going to work my way through here, and then I'll probably talk about some of the things I use as a fertilizer too, but let me get this cleaned up first. I got to finish this side. I got to work on this side. You can see some of these are growing 3 feet or more in already, and if they set fruit, they're just going to break and fall. And then this side also needs to be dealt with. Here's a before of that. Too much rain to record, not too much to work. I'll show you what I do later. So it's still drizzling a bit, but I wanted to show you this. I actually came all the way up to the top, so I'm way up high in my garden now. There's so much growth you can't really see the garden or the bottom much, but I'm way up here and just prune these top ones. And I don't have an entire top layer here, but I do have a couple screened sections that come across. And got these ones clipped down here now, so they're going to kind of continue this way to cover this. Pretty high pruning stuff. A couple things to remember too when you're pruning is that you're cutting off body parts. The tomato has a body. It's a plant body, different than ours, but you're cutting off all these parts. So if you cut off too much, remember photosynthesis, you remember them being like little receptors to absorb energy from the sun and use that to grow. You gotta leave some. You cut them all off, it ain't gonna do well. But also, if you see here, there is a good level of breathability. So the wind's actually blowing through it right now. All these guys are just sitting here. So lemon boys over here, pink girls over here. So we've got a little bit before we're really going to have a big harvest. Those two will be coming in today. I'll show you today's harvest at the end of this video. And then also something neat on the way, so stay tuned for that. But when I do prune them, they need energy to kind of bounce back from all the wounds they just sustained. So I'm also going to show you two of my favorite fertilizers, and I'm going to apply that to them today. If it rains later, that'll be fine. It'll just help get it down into the soil for them to absorb. One's going to be more of an instant fertilizer. The other one's going to be more of a time-released fertilizer. They're natural things that we pretty much generate on our homestead with the life that we live. They're really cool. If you want to see a video on my 4 favorite easy DIY liquid fertilizers, I do have a video of that too that you guys can check out. But I'll be top dressing the soil with some time release fertilizer and then adding one of my special liquid fertilizers in there, which I'll show you guys in a bit. But just wanted to give you a look at this right now and just let you see how this looks pruned back now. It's not quite as much of a privacy fence. And then also any subpar tomatoes like these two here, we really don't use much for pest control here. Mostly we use wild things like lizards and snakes and praying mantises and stuff like that, but these two got some pretty good caterpillar holes in them. So if they keep growing, it's just going to waste energy because it's never going to get better. So these are going to get dropped off at the chickens. That'll be heading to the compost, and then we'll have a harvest coming to the house, and I'll show you something special about all that. But here's this one right now. Pruned back, looking good. Now we've got that one. Can you see the difference? Right side, left side, right side, left side. And I am pretty sure if I cut off every single leaf on one of these plants and chopped off the tip where all the new growth was coming, they could bounce back from that. You know, they've got little places where they can come. How you doing, Blizzard? Breakfast yet or no? Yes. It's time for breakfast. I'll be back. But I think they could bounce back from that, but it's best to leave growth. If you prune them and they die, you probably know you pruned too much or didn't have enough roots established to bounce back from how drastically you pruned it. Hey buddy. So here's a before on this side right now. Now let's look how it looks after. Oh yeah, let's get a before up here too. Ooh. Getting a little more rainy, although now it's lightening up, but part of life is that you got to roll with the punches, learn not to get hit too often, and the show must go on. A lot of days I feel like giving up, a lot of days I don't feel like doing anything, just being honest with you. This job's got to get done. I have an opportunity today. I'm waiting for something else to happen, so while I wait, I got to invest as much time as I can. If the weather doesn't work out well, I can't control the weather. All I can control is what I do about it. Thankfully, thanks to Southern Blessed Homestead, I got some nice military rain gear that's going to keep me dry if it starts back up again. It literally just shut down as I got out here to keep going. But one thing I wanted to mention about perseverance, I recently got a text from one of my cousins, and he watches our channel. I didn't know, you know, all that long ago that my cousin watched my channel. Part of putting our life out there is that family and friends can check in on us on a pretty regular basis. But one thing that he mentioned is he says, gotta say I'm inspired by you to do a little extra after I get home from work. You're doing great things for people and you don't even know it. And he started by talking about some garden stuff, and he closed by saying that, you know, his son really wants to meet up sometime, who's 7 years old, but he enjoys what we're up to here as a family. And that's all I want to do is put my life out there. Hopefully some people can learn from it. I think that the life we're living has a lot of wisdom to it. The amount of tomatoes we have here, you know, if we're gonna eat them, we might as well grow them. If we learn to do a better job, that's better. So I'm out here, the show must go on. I might be able to take this off and just get back to work, but got a couple other things to show you guys quick. Let me just finish this one, and I'll start gathering some harvests from around here too. And I think you guys are gonna like what you get to see here in a minute. I'm gonna pause for a moment, share a couple thoughts here too about this. Number one, is this taking me some time? Absolutely. You just saw my son maybe run through, my oldest son. He's working in another area of the garden. We can talk while we work. And I can show them this stuff too. They're aware of what I'm doing. It's just not at the stage that I'm turning this particular garden maintenance chore over to them. That's fine. But you know, to get a return on the investment, you're gonna have to have an investment. Buying a plant or starting a seed is an investment. If you fertilize it, you're putting more investment into it. If you water it, you're putting more investment into it. If you prune it, you're putting more investment into it. If you build structures for them to climb up, you're putting more investment into it. Now, sometimes planting a seed can get you a harvest. It can. A lot of stuff runs itself. For that minimal investment, you'll get a return on your investment. Sometimes though, you add a little bit of fertilizer or something, all of a sudden you astronomically increase the return that you get on that investment. I invest time in my garden, not as much as I need to really have it, you know, be the way that it could be, but enough that I get a pretty good return on my investment. Not everyone's able to do all the physical labor I do. I get that. People are at different stages of life. A couple things to think about. Number one, a lot of this I can be turning over to the children in the next couple of years. I had some friends over the other day and Bugger was helping like super hardcore. And I asked him, and I had no idea what he was going to say, but I said, hey, why do you work so hard helping your family? And he goes, because I want to eat. Now, we've never starved our children, but there's a principle that if you don't work, you don't eat. That's why socialism, communism doesn't work a lot. No incentive to work, and they get to eat, and it all falls apart. But he understands that principle. He understands that he has a certain weight to his body. He's a child. He gets a lot of good playtime, a lot of good fun time, but also there's things that he can do to carry his minimal weight. So he likes to be involved. Ultimately, I don't need to teach him how to be a child. He is a child, but he's a growing child, which means he's growing into a man. I have to teach him of the destination. Along the way, he'll learn how to faithfully be a child, because I'm investing in that too, but I'm teaching him how to be a man. And so you can have others help you. At the early stages of life, when you're more fit, sometimes it's good to get that investment of what you can do put into place. If you have children, eventually they can take over some of that. And if you get older, say you got a garden. Trust me, people are paying a lot more attention to the supply chain, a lot more attention to the needs right now. Maybe there's a neighbor who doesn't have the land. Maybe there's, you know, I don't like teenagers per se as far as a phrase, because I don't believe in teen culture, teenage rebellion, all that stuff. There's big children and there's young adults. And you can tell based on how they behave and carry themselves, not based upon what age they happen to be. I know some pretty small children that are a lot more mature than some adults I know. The adults would be more like big children, and those children would be more like young adults. But maybe there's somebody who lives by you, who for a portion of the harvest would come do some of this stuff. Maybe you've got a wealth of information in your head. Maybe you've been doing this, you know. I'm not an expert, I'm just learning. But I'm sharing what I learn. I'm sharing what works for me, for my family on this property. Possibly something good for you guys to think about. But if you've got that wealth of information, if you have something established that just needs the maintenance, why don't you work out a deal with somebody in your community, somebody at church, one of your neighbors, who maybe wants to learn, who maybe doesn't mind you sitting on a chair under an umbrella in the shade, sipping on a sweet tea or you know, lemonade, and just walking them through some of this stuff. Good way to build a relationship, good way to pass on that generational knowledge to the next generation and teach somebody else how to do this stuff. Not everyone's got a YouTube channel, not everyone's got the time to do it in the first place, much less do it and record it, much less do it and record it and edit it, okay? I'm not a wealth of knowledge on a lot of stuff, but I'm a student and I'm learning a lot. A lot of my stuff comes from hands-on education. You know, hands-on. A lot of people are like that. Maybe you've got a garden they'd like to get their hands on, if you know what I mean. I'm gonna clean this up, then I'll show you those fertilizers, and then we'll see something else really cool. Stay tuned. Got that side done now, and I'll give you a closer look at it in a second. Picked 4 subpar ones off so far. This one here had that sun blister. It was kind of sad because it was getting to be such a close ripe one, and these just had so many holes in them. And again, these get fed to the chickens. You know, we grow this for food. Not all of it's our food. Some of it we share with friends. Some of it we barter. Some of it goes to our animals, and there's no problem with that. Also, some of it feeds our soil. I got pretty much 3 5-gallon buckets. This one still got some of the snake gourd remnants that were tangled up at the top from last year, but underneath that, it's all the cut up leaves from the tomatoes. And these ones are pretty much tomatoes to the top. Again, I like to take my scissors and just cut it up a little bit because it helps with the process of composting. Always like to be adding that green stuff in there to whatever I've got mixing already, help it cook down. Off of this whole thing, I only got 2 ripe tomatoes I'm going to get right now. They both happen to be lemon boys, and same thing, I like to snip these off with scissors. Just the easiest way to go. If it was Chinese red noodle beans or something, I would just twist them off, but these, that's the way I take them out. Couple lemon boys. I'll bring in a harvest today. We may eat some today or tomorrow, and then if not, whatever comes in on Sunday is probably back to the old canner, and we'll put some more up to use later in the kitchen. Let's move on to the fertilizer right now, and I'll show you a couple things I like to do. Also, I'll just show you this one first. Here's this wall. That's how it looks now. I was talking to my boy. What'd you say about it?
It looked a lot easier to find the tomatoes.
A lot easier to find the tomatoes. So it gives me a good indication of how each plant is doing and kind of how they're working, because I can see all the different tomatoes. Again, there's not a lot of leaf stuff until I get up to where the tomatoes kind of are, and then some stuff to let them grow. You can see them moving across that top now. If those go about another 2.5 feet, these go about another 2.5, 3 feet, we'll be covered. And this one is not made out of the biggest cedars, especially the top there, so I'll probably need to replace it this fall. If you notice when I shake it, it wiggles. If that's what's happening, a strong wind could take it off. And again, these tomatoes are putting forth a lot of weight. Here's this path. If you move, my boy, you can see I did prune back that cherry bush a little bit too. Walk through the path quick and then stop at the end because there's a thing cutting across a passion fruit vine. But you can see you can walk up now, harvest tomatoes from this side if you want, and then come on back. And then come on back. Yeah, look at that. And he was weeding. He just asked for a snack. So what'd you get?
Piece of rhubarb.
A piece of rhubarb. And what part do you eat?
A stem.
Why do you only eat the stem?
Because the leaf is poisonous.
Yeah, good idea. So here's a look at these tomatoes from this side. It looks like a completely different place. And I'm going to step back for a minute. Yeah, you can see. Just look at all those tomatoes. We come over here now, you can see this stuff is more a two-dimensional growing. Everything kind of fits within about a foot or 18 inches, even with all the ones leafing out. And same thing over here. Now, fertilizer. Down over here, I have 2 of my favorite 4 fertilizers that we make on the homestead. This one is fish emulsion. So we like to fish because we're close to a lake, we're close to a lot of rivers and streams and creeks. A lot of the stuff in there is edible, and they're welcome to join us at the dinner table on a pretty regular basis. Again, you gotta watch for mercury content and how often you eat certain things, but there's a lot out there, and we're learning to eat a lot of different ones, from bow fishing to regular fishing to jugging to spear fishing. There's a lot of great ways that we can get fish. And we like to view everything as a resource here. There's a song by the Christian artist Jason Gray that I think it's called Nothing is Wasted. And you combine that with something like Romans 8:28, that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. On the homestead, it's very similar, that nothing's wasted. Everything works together for good. Sometimes there's bugs out here, and we have a pond that we put in, a little pond. It's got some little fish in there, but the children will ask, Dad, can we go collect bugs? So they'll come out here, collect a bunch of bugs, and they'll feed the fish. Even those garden pests are working together for good. Here, these tomatoes that aren't gonna do so good, these work together for good. They go and feed our poultry. A lot of times our poultry, you toss a ripe tomato to sheep though, and it'll eat it too. Here, the rabbit manure. That's the reason we have rabbits right now, is for their manure. That's another one of mine. And then the fish emulsion. We can take the meat off these fish. Sometimes I'm getting a little creative. I started doing like a redneck taxidermy for some of the gar. That's working pretty well. I'll do a video about that in the future. But once we fillet the fish and take the meat off, often we'll let our chickens peck the carcasses clean. They'll take all that stuff out of there and they'll use it as food, and that's really good for them. We also like to drop them in a 5-gallon bucket of water and then cover them. And you leave it for a while. This one's been run through a couple times, so it's not quite as stinky, but fish emulsion is a very powerful fertilizer. I used to buy it for my pepper plants back when I lived up in Wisconsin. It helps get plants off to a great start, but also there's a lot of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium. Tomatoes like calcium, right? And that's all in here too. The nitrogen's pretty good because it's a good level that's not going to burn your plants, but the stuff is so strong just on its own. I normally dilute it about 10 to 1. Now this I've cycled through a couple times. I would pour off some into a bucket, add the water, fertilize, and get to the bottom, and then refill it. And then do it again and again. So it's getting to the point that soon all I'm going to have is a bunch of clear, you know, white shiny bones. There's not going to be anything left in here, but pretty much clear water and bones. So we're not there yet. There's still a lot of stuff in here, a lot of different particles, a lot of different minerals, nutrients, things that can feed the plants. And you add that to your soil, it'll help the microbes, it'll help give the plants that extra food, helps them grow vigorously, getting this much nutrition. It helps them have really good, strong growth. That helps them with fighting off diseases and pests and kind of recovering from any little attack they get. So I'm gonna dump this out first across this thing. We just had a rain, this isn't that strong. But then once I add this, which is gonna be like a time-released fertilizer, I can take rabbit manure, put water in there, and make a rabbit manure tea and use it as a liquid fertilizer. I'm just gonna top dress this, so over time, it'll break down. As it rains, it'll help that soak into the soil. It's one of the best manures that I know of. It's a cold manure, so it doesn't need to be composted first. It's not gonna burn the plants. It'll just sit here like little fertilizer pellets on the top and then go through it, you know, seep down in the soil, feed the roots. It's got some good nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. It helps the soil retain moisture. We're kind of doing some back to Eden stuff, some no-till stuff where we just keep adding to the top. That works really well for us here. It helps it retain moisture so your plants don't dry as easy. And one thing to remember too, when you're watering your plants, give them a good soak. A good soak allows them to get deep roots that are very strong. If you just splash a little bit of water on top and then splash a little bit of water on top, they don't get the same growth and the long-term effect is not as good. Besides the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, these also have magnesium and calcium, some good stuff for here too. So we like to enrich the soil with these. It'll help these plants to flower. It'll help them to put forth some good fruit. It helps them with disease resistant to be, you know, a good, healthy, strong plant. And again, this helps with the microbes. You know, soil is a living organism. A lot of gardeners talk about not really growing the food, but they're growing the soil. And the better your soil is, that's why we don't like tilling it and disturbing it and stuff like that, then the better the plants that we plant in there are going to be. Our natural soil here in the Ozarks is mostly rock and clay. Now clay's got a lot of good stuff in there for the plants, but it's hard for the plants to get them out when it's like a rock and just dry clay. So we've been, you know, they got that beneath here, but there's a lot of good things at the top level too, like I'm gonna put this. So let me dress this up quick, and then off camera, you know, this is only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is only 12 of my tomato plants. I've got another pile over there, another pile over there, a bunch over there. I'm gonna do all that off camera, but when I'm done, I'm gonna show you something really cool about how this all works together for good, and how nothing is wasted, and how we've organized a few things here on our homestead that make it a lot better for us. Let's get to fertilizing. One other thing I'll mention about using the rabbit manure is if you notice the lowest tomatoes here, about 18 inches to 2 feet above where I put the manure. If I was growing carrots, potatoes, sweet potatoes, other things that are going to be a crop under the soil, I like to amend the soil with rabbit manure for sure, but I like to make sure that when I do that, it's at least 6 months before I'm going to be harvesting any of my underground, you know, the root vegetables, underground harvest stuff, because that's going to be right down there by the manure, which is just a nice way of saying poop, fecal matter. So that's one thing to think about. This though, giving them a nice feed like this after a nice prune, it's going to take a couple days for all these tomatoes to get kind of straightened out, get their leaves oriented where they want them, kind of understand what happened to them. They were heading one direction, now I got them all going a different direction, so they've got to adjust to that. And they've just kind of had a massive wound. A lot of their little parts got cut off of these plant bodies. But this is going to help them bounce back, and you're going to see that these heat up real nice in the sun now. You'll see some more growth coming in. Obviously generating this much stuff is because I haven't been on top of this project. If I was out here on a more regular basis, anytime I see the leaves start to yellow or start to get a little bit of, you know, imperfections, I could just snip them off, take them to the compost right away. If I was keeping a closer eye on it, I wouldn't have so many that are still sun blistered hanging there from my plants, draining from the precious resources that the plants have. Now I've got the time to devote to do this, so I'm doing it quick, and I think you guys are gonna like how we end this thing too. Stay tuned. Check that out. You see how it's just fish scales and mostly little rib bones? I got down to the end of that thing and dumped out a little extra. Now, as I continue to add to these beds, because we make our raised beds out of the rocks that we have in this area, we can keep adding more and more layers of rocks, and as they get older, these beds can get deeper. A tomato will grow roots as high as the soil is. If I cover this tomato up to here, it would have soil, or I mean if I covered it, yeah, with soil up to here, it would grow roots all the way down to there. That's why a lot of times when I plant them, if this was how tall my plant was, I would bury all that, either in a trench and then have the tip turned up, or just dig down that deep when I planted it and let it go so it can establish all those roots. But adding to these and top dressing, putting stuff like this in there makes these beds deeper. And then over time you just wind up with a deeper raised bed. My raised beds will get more raised. These will break down. The microorganisms in the soil will be eating them. And I just gotta remember, you know, there's a lot of spiky little guys in here right now. I don't plant root vegetables in here really anyway. And if I do, it's stuff like carrots or radishes where I just pull up from the surface. I don't need to be digging through with my hands. Otherwise this would be an issue. So good reason to use garden tools and remember what's in your raised beds. For this stuff to really be absorbed into the plants and used for food, it's going to need to become water soluble. So a lot of the things as microorganisms and small insects and stuff feast on these, and then it passes through their system, these guys will be able to use it later, and it'll just enrich the beds all the more. I don't know if those cicadas were going off as hard as they are right now before, but hopefully they don't distract you too much. Also, if you want to see a really cool video of a cicada emerge, I filmed that a couple years ago. I'll link it up here for you guys to check out. But here's the deal, right? A project like this, we wind up with 3 different things. I already said they're all useful. We got our trimmings, and since we're not rooting some, you know, we could take the suckers and we could put them in water and they would grow roots and we could clone them. Since we're not doing that, this has all been chopped up for the compost. We also have a lovely bowl of ripe tomatoes to take home. I already ate a bit. And the third thing is some of these that are subpar. This one's actually pretty good, but I'm not doing anything with these today. So there's some other ones I can work through for our fresh ones. And then if we do can some of these on Sunday, this one, it's got some holes in the top. There's definitely stuff that's good here, but our animals can enjoy that too. So I actually got about a half a 5-gallon bucket of subpar ones. Part of that's because of the sun blistering. Part of that's because I haven't done a lot out here with the tomatoes. I pulled a couple good harvests. I got rid of some yucky ones, but I haven't been on top of the garden as I should be. So I've got these 3 things. One thing to consider when setting up your homestead, or you notice your property, and being able to use stuff like this, is to find uses for it all. Because I have compost bins made, because I have chickens, because we eat it and preserve, okay? Because reaping a harvest doesn't matter if you don't put it all to use. Only so much you can eat fresh. If we're able to preserve it, that's a bonus. But it's just kind of how you set things up. Now our garden at the moment is not really in the zone it's going to be in eventually. Eventually I'll have probably a closer garden set up, but I'm still young enough I don't mind the stroll up here. I'm building up this section of the area of our property. I'm probably going to turn it over to a permaculture food forest eventually. They'll just have some really rich soil. But you'll notice that between me taking this to the house to process, eventually I'll take it to the outdoor kitchen, which will be even closer, but I'm going to walk past my compost and I'm going to walk past my poultry. All kind of in an area that makes sense. So Monster Truck and I are going to go add some of these to the compost, feed some of these to the chickens, and then drop this off for Mama Pepper, and probably have her come take a look at this if she's got a free moment too, just to see how this stuff looks pruned up, because it almost never looks this way. It's kind of reaching its full potential right now when I clean it and make it look nice, and I kind of just want to show off my work, please my wife. So we'll see if she'll come out and take a peek. You ready, Monster Truck?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's go. Just dump it. And then pick a couple nice ones to throw over to the one behind us. Boy. Yeah, sun blistered, man. Beautiful tomato otherwise, huh?
Yeah.
Good chicken food though. See if you can make that over the fence. Yeah. Boy, I went chasing that. Toss like 2 more over the fence there. These guys tear it up. See, they like tomatoes. Using it all with a purpose. Nothing is wasted. Wow, that one's that strong? He's actually standing on a tomato. It's cracking, but wow. Hey, if you got a juicy one or two, throw them to the ducks again. And we'll just let these guys clean them up. Alright, next stop, compost. Right here is my current compost system. I recently upgraded this year, redid it in brick, covered it. I got a full video on that you guys can check out. It was worth the effort. But what I like to do, this middle one's the one I kind of got cooking right now. So since I know there's no seeds in here, and I don't need to worry about fully composting seeds, I'm just gonna dump them in here and mix this up real quick, and then I'll go deliver these tomatoes to Mama. Sit a little bit and then give it another stir later. As always, and as I mentioned earlier, guys, this is just something I do. It's not that I'm a professional. I'm a student. I'm learning. If there is things that I did not mention that you would like to include in the comment section, by all means, leave a comment. Say, oh, if you're getting blossom end rot, maybe you want to put some Epsom salt in there, or, you know, anything I didn't cover in this scope of it. But let's give these to Mama. I'll let you guys work the comment section a bit with some added info. I'll see if she'll come up and take a peek. I just put her through a lot with canning these. You'll notice also the yellow one's the lemon boy. That green one broke off when I was pruning, so I've got a couple green ones and we'll just see if they'll ripen on the counter. But here she comes. Oh, yep, just a moment, my lady, no problem. That's today's harvest. We can play with some stuff on Sunday and can it up. And if we need any fresh ones for tonight or tomorrow, we got them. Would you come take a peek at something with me?
Yep.
Main points of this story are tomato cages, inferior. Get some tomato clips if you need, or bob and weave them on a cattle panel or something like that. You can see how it works for us. I like that, and we'll see how she likes it. You like your rosemary getting sunlight like that? It made it through the winter, right?
You did.
Yeah.
Through the winter.
So here's the deal. Look at these fences here.
Whoa, those look beautiful.
It gives you a good view of what we got growing.
Yeah.
And soon, I think it'll close in the whole top. Do you see that? How high they are?
Wow.
I was pruning some of these other ones off camera and stuff too, and got a bit to still show at the main section, or to do at the main section. But I also showed them how I like to amend the soil. I added some fish emulsion and rabbit manure to boost them now that they've been repositioned and they've got some cuts to grow back from. But I'm liking it.
You definitely have a green thumb, my love.
I'm learning. You want to see your grapes real quick?
Sure.
Look above your head.
Darling, look up here.
Oh, wow.
See now that I pruned them back and trellised them up?
Yeah.
Those are just little concords, but they're coming in pretty good.
Ooh, I can't wait to juice those.
Well, these are ready to snip off. I've got some scissors right here. So, why don't you, yeah. While she's snipping off those grapes and we're switching gears on our life, we'll say that's it for this video, guys. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone if you think they're gonna help, and be blessed. Papa out.
Thank you for watching. Hit the left button. Thumbs up. But well.